Good afternoon, everyone. Last class we discussed few details about Wheatstone bridge circuitry. We also discussed why it is not possible to correctly measure the change in resistance because of change in strain. And we also stressed that we need some external circuit called as Wheatstone bridge circuit so that we can measure that change in resistance in terms of change in output voltage. Just to recap, this was what the Wheatstone bridge circuit looked like. This is the supply voltage, which is normally 6 to 9 volt DC, and across these 2 points, apex points. There are 4 apex points. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out of these 4 points, across 2 points, any of the 2 points, we can provide the supply voltage, and across remaining 2 apex points, we can measure the output voltage. So whenever the bridge is unbalanced, it will start showing me some output voltage, and that output voltage is related to this change in resistance because of strain change, and that is how we can measure the strain, and from strain we can measure stress, from stress we can measure the force. We are discussing about use of strain gauge as a force transducer or load transducer. That's what we discussed in the last class. Quickly we'll see 4 basic configurations of a strain gauge, Wheatstone bridge strain gauge circuitries. 3 configurations basically we'll be studying. The first one is called as the quarter bridge strain gauge circuit. Now, if we call this 4 arms as a full bridge having 4 resistances, say R1, R2, R3, and R4. Out of these 4 resistances, if I replace one resistance by a strain gauge, I repeat, I replace one resistance in one arm by one strain gauge. What I'm doing, I'm making this as one arm sensitive or single arm sensitive Wheatstone bridge. Now this one arm out of 4 arms is 1/4 of the full bridge. 1/4 of the full bridge is also called as quarter bridge. If all the resistances are active strain gauges, I'll be calling it as full bridge. If 2 resistances are replaced by strain gauges, I'm going to call it as half bridge. If 1 resistance is replaced by strain gauge, I'm going to call it as a 1/4 bridge or a quarter bridge, Wheatstone bridge circuit. Quarter bridge, Wheatstone bridge circuit. So I have quarter bridge, half bridge, and full bridge. I repeat, in quarter bridge, out of the 4 arms, one arm is sensitive to strain gauge. So that is quarter bridge. If out of the 4 arms, 2 resistances are replaced by strain gauges, I call it as half bridge circuitry. Only thing is that one strain gauge will be subjected to tensile strain and the other strain gauge will be subjected to compressive strain. So this is my half bridge. And the full bridge, all the 4 arms, all the 4 resistances in the 4 arms are replaced by 4 strain gauges. So R1, R2, R3, R4, R1, R2, R3, R4 are replaced by 4 strain gauges. Strain gauge 1, strain gauge 2, strain gauge 3, and strain gauge 4. Then it becomes a full bridge or a 4-arm Wheatstone bridge circuitry, right? So only thing is that in the adjacent arms, I should have opposite natured strains. See, in these adjacent arms, one strain gauge is subjected to tensile strain and the other strain gauge is subjected to compressive strain. In this arm, I have one strain gauge subjected to tensile strain and the other strain gauge is subjected to compressive strain, right? So opposite nature. So these two adjacent arms, one is compressive, one is tensile. These two adjacent arms, one is tensile, the other is compressive. These two arms, one is compressive and the other is tensile, right? And in these two arms, I have one tensile and one compressive. So this is how the four-arm bridge or full bridge circuitry is built. Now, each one of these configurations has its own advantages and limitations. So if I want more sensitive strain gauge circuitry, I should go in for four-arm bridge circuitry. Little lesser sensitive, I can go in for half bridge or two-arm bridge circuitry. And if I got, okay, very less sensitive circuit, if I want, I can go in for single arm bridge or a quarter bridge, right? Equation wise, if you remember the output voltage, just be attentive. The output voltage from this quarter bridge circuitry is equal to, I'll be taking this V input on the right hand side. Okay, V input on the right hand side. So V output voltage that will be measured here. This output voltage is equal to 1/4 into gauge factor into strain, that is epsilon, into V input. Okay. So similarly for half bridge, I got V output is equal to half. See, the coefficient is changing. For quarter bridge or one arm bridge, I have bridge constant as 1/4. For half bridge, I have got the bridge constant as 1.5. And for full bridge, I have the bridge constant of 1. So it is not seen here, it is 1, right? So what does that mean? Okay, if the input voltage is same, let us say 6 volt DC in all the three configurations, V input is fixed, gauge factor is also, let us say 2, right? Okay, then if I am subjecting this strain gauge to, let us say, 500 microstrain, okay, 500 microstrain. So that strain will be induced by loading the specimen, isn't it? So corresponding to that, if I am getting 10 millivolt as the output voltage, as an example, so corresponding to 500 induced strain, suppose I am getting 10 millivolt as the output voltage. In half bridge, what will happen? I am inducing the same amount of strain, that is 500 microstrain. What I'll be getting, because the bridge constant is half that of quarter bridge, what will happen? The output voltage will be doubled, even if both the bridges are subjected to same amount of strain, 500 microstrain. I'll be getting 20 millivolt as the output voltage from half bridge. And in case of full bridge or four-arm bridge, corresponding to same amount of strain induced, that is 500 microstrain, I'll be getting 40 millivolt as the output voltage. So what does that mean? For the same amount of strain induced, half bridge gives me double the output obtained in quarter bridge. Full bridge gives me double the output that of half bridge, or full bridge gives me 4 times the output that of quarter bridge, isn't it? So for the same amount of strain induced, if I'm getting larger output voltage, what I call it as output by input is sensitivity. So if I'm getting large output for the same amount of strain, I call this full bridge as the most sensitive of the three configurations, right? So it is giving me 4 times the output voltage as compared to quarter bridge, and it is giving me 2 times the output voltage as compared to half bridge, right? So in the above equations, we have gauge factor. We have already defined this. Gauge factor is the ratio of delta R by R upon delta L by L, or epsilon, where epsilon is delta L by L. So gauge factor is the ratio of unit change in resistance to unit change in strain. So gauge factor, normally designated by K, is equal to delta R by R upon epsilon. Okay. So these are the configurations we should know, and we should know the characteristics broadly. Now let us see the strain gauge load cell. Two types of load cells or force transducers will be studying briefly. As I said, I want to use strain gauge for measurement of this applied force. I think we have discussed this application last few lectures, isn't it? The test specimen which is having rectangular cross section, I am applying some force. I have mounted strain gauge to sense the tensile strain on the top surface and strain gauge at the bottom surface to measure the compressive strain. Now this tensile strain and compressive strain gauges become the arms of the Wheatstone bridge. Now tensile strain gauge, let us say red colored shown, this is giving me plus epsilon or plus delta R, and this is subjected to compressive strain. It is giving me minus epsilon or minus delta R. Okay, so because of that, because of application of force, stresses will be induced. Because of stresses induced, strains will be induced, and because of strains, there will be resistance change in the strain gauges, and the bridge becomes unbalanced. Unbalanced means what? It shows me some output voltage. This output voltage, as we have seen in the previous slide, this output voltage can be correlated with strain induced. So this is unbalanced bridge condition. When the load is removed, the test specimen, when the load is removed, the bridge, even if strain gauges are there, but those are not subjected to strain, right? The beam is horizontal, as you can see, there is no external force. So resistance, all the four resistances are same. So ratio of resistances is also same. So output voltage will be 0. In that case, I call it as a balanced bridge. Whereas after application of load, the bridge becomes unbalanced. And the unbalanced output voltage is the measure of strain. So the same thing in statements. With no force applied to the test specimen, both strain gauges have equal resistance and the bridge circuit is balanced. However, when a downward force is applied to the free end of the specimen, it will bend downwards, stretching gauge 1 and compressing gauge 2 and giving some output voltage. So this is cantilever beam type strain gauge load cell. We have a cylindrical specimen type strain gauge load cell. This can be used beneath a platform. आपण जे टी शॉप मध्ये किंवा ग्रोसरी शॉप मध्ये किंवा ज्वेलर शॉप मध्ये जे बघतो, above this top surface there will be a pan. फक्त आपल्याला पॅन दिसतो आणि पॅनच्या खाली I have a cylindrical load cell. The cylindrical load cell मध्ये काय? Got it? इथं मी असा पॅन ठेवतो, पॅन असतो, right? Only pan is seen and there is this cylindrical specimen is hidden below the pan. Okay. आणि या cylindrical specimen वर काय केलं? Two strain gauges in longitudinal directions and two strain gauges in the lateral directions, right? R2 and R3 in the lateral direction and R1 and R4 in longitudinal direction. So both when I apply the compressive load, वरती काहीतरी weight ठेवलं, चहा, grocery किंवा gold, whatever we keep on the pan, it will be applied some load on the top of the cylindrical specimen. And because of this compressive load, I'll be having compressive strain induced in R1 and R4. In R1 and R4 will be minus epsilon, right? So compressive strain that is induced. Whereas, try to visualize when I apply compressive load, the cylinder tries to bulge out, isn't it? थोडं exaggerated झालं, दिसत नाही आपल्याला, but it will be subjected to what is called as hoop stress or circumferential stress, isn't it? It will try to expand. Try to expand म्हणजे काय झालं? Outer shell will be subjected to expansion. म्हणजे काय? Tension, right? So R3, R2 and R3 will be subjected to tensile strain, isn't it? So tensile strain with some Poisson's ratio, isn't it? Because that is also called as lateral strain, isn't it? So these will be tensile strains and these will be compressive strains, right? So R3 and R2 and R3 will be subjected to tensile strain, so plus epsilon, and R1 and R4 will be subjected to minus epsilon. This is the supply voltage, and when after application of load, I'll be getting output voltage V0, which will be normally in microvolt or millivolt, and that is correlated with applied load. So this is how my cylindrical specimen type strain gauge load cell works. Okay, that is broadly about the strain gauge as a force transducer. There are certain disadvantages or some challenges while using the strain gauge as a force transducer, particularly when I got temperature variations in the surroundings. What happens, friends, if we look at the coil or the foil of the strain gauge wire? As I told you, it is made up of copper or cupronickel alloys. Okay. Now, when I mount it on the specimen surface, I expect that the resistance change should be only because of the length change. Okay. R is equal to resistivity rho into L by A. So resistance change should be ideally with respect to length change alone. But practically what happens? The resistance change that is occurring is a combination of resistance change due to strain plus resistance change due to temperature. So that delta R that I get, delta R that I get is equal to delta R because of epsilon, delta R because of epsilon plus delta R because of T, temperature T. So ideally I expect that this delta R resistance change that I get should be equal to delta R because of epsilon alone, isn't it? So I want delta R to be equal to delta R suffix epsilon. But practically what happens? There will be resistance change in the strain gauge wire, not only because of strain change, but also because of temperature change. So this delta R that I get in the strain gauge is a summation of delta R because of epsilon plus delta R because of T, temperature. So when I measure the output voltage through the Wheatstone bridge, if there are temperature effects, what happens? I'll not be getting the correct reading, because that resistance change is not just because of strain change, it is also because of temperature. So some additional value of resistance change. So it will not correspond to resistance change because of strain alone. It will be resistance change because of strain plus resistance change because of temperature. So this is a limitation, but there is a solution to overcome this limitation. What they do is they use a dummy gauge. Dummy gauge चा अर्थ काय? नावातच dummy म्हणजे it will not be sensing any strain, but it will be sensing some temperature. So one dummy gauge is mounted by the side of the active gauge. And what is the function of the dummy gauge? Its function is to measure the resistance change because of temperature. It will not sense the resistance change due to strain, right? It will be sensing only resistance change because of temperature. And they are kept in the adjacent arms, active gauge, and shezari, dummy gauge. When I write down the equation, these active gauge and dummy gauge come in divisive mode or in subtractive mode. Whatever is the temperature, whatever is the delta R in the active gauge that I am getting, in the active gauge delta R I am getting because of delta R epsilon plus delta R T. Minus what I get is in the dummy gauge, delta R will be equal to delta R because of T alone. And because this is the subtractive mode, delta R because of T is eliminated. And what I get as the output voltage is the voltage change because of resistance change because of strain alone, right? So this is how the compensation, temperature compensation in strain gauge is done. Let us quickly see the slide. Ideally, we would like the resistance of the strain gauge to change only in response to applied strain. However, strain gauge material as well as the specimen material to which the gauge is applied will also respond to changes in temperature. The same thing I discussed. Strain gauge manufacturers attempt to minimize sensitivity to temperature by processing the gauge material to compensate for the thermal expansion of the specimen material. Compensated gauges reduce the thermal sensitivity. They do not totally remove it, but it is temperature compensation. Just take representative sketch. This is my active gauge, which is subjected to strain as well as temperature. This is the dummy gauge, which will not, which will be inactive to strain, but will be active to temperature change. And here, when I keep this, so this there will be delta R only because of T, and here delta R will be delta R because of epsilon plus delta R because of T, and because they are in subtractive mode, ultimately the delta R because of T is eliminated, and what I get is purely resistance change because of strain alone. By using two gauges, one gauge is active, second gauge is dummy, is placed transverse to the applied strain. The strain has little effect on the second gauge called the dummy gauge. However, dummy strains का काही effect होते हैं, there will be effect only of temperature. Because the temperature changes are identical in the two gauges, the ratio of the resistances does not change. The voltage does not change, and the effect of the temperature change are minimized. So this is how the temperature compensation is brought about in the strain gauge circuit. Right? Let us move to temperature measurement. Till now we discussed about strain gauge as a force transducer or strain gauge as a load transducer. Now we'll see some aspects of temperature measurement. Now we are going to study two types of temperature measuring transducers or sensors. One is EMF based and the second one is variable resistance based. In EMF based, we make use of thermocouples, and in resistance based, we make use of RTD or resistance temperature detectors, and second category making use of semiconductors called as thermistors. We'll see one by one. First, EMF based, that is thermocouple. We know the principle of thermocouples. If two different metals A and B are connected with a junction, metal A and B are connected as a junction, right? And the hot junction, this junction is subjected to heat. At the other end, I'll be getting potential difference. Now, don't look at this balancing circuitry. When we study the signal conditioning devices, we'll study this in detail. Principally, in the thermocouple, I'll be getting two junctions, one hot junction, and the other junction is a cold junction or the room temperature junction. So when there is a temperature difference between hot end and cold end, EMF is induced in the external circuitry, and that EMF or output voltage is proportional to temperature difference, and that this principle helps me in measurement of temperature by using thermocouple. So principally, this is called as a Seebeck effect. If two different metals A and B, dissimilar metals A and B, are connected with a junction and a voltmeter, and then if the junction is heated, the meter should show a voltage. There will be some output voltage when there is a temperature. Because of temperature difference, if I am getting output voltage, that is called as Seebeck effect. This is known as Seebeck effect. Seebeck voltage is equal to delta VB will be equal to alpha into delta T. So output voltage, Seebeck output voltage in case of thermocouples is proportional to delta T, where alpha is called as the Seebeck coefficient or Seebeck constant. It will vary with different pair of dissimilar metals. This is what is the principle of thermocouples. What is the construction? We'll be having three types of constructions used in mechatronic applications. One is grounded type of thermocouple junction. Second one is ungrounded type of thermocouple junction. The third one is exposed type of thermocouple junction. As you can see, this is the pair of dissimilar metals. When it is connected to ground, this is the junction. Just be attentive. This is the junction of two dissimilar metals. When it is connected to the ground, it is called as the grounded type of thermocouple junction. See, in the ungrounded type, I have one metal, another metal, the junction of two dissimilar metals. Now this junction is not connected to the ground, right? This is called as ungrounded. Here it is grounded. Now grounded tends to provide me better voltage difference, better output voltage. It is more sensitive than ungrounded type. But ungrounded type has got better insulation, electrical insulation. So there are relative advantages and limitations. Whereas in the third case, exposed junction. right? So I have got the casing limited to this, and the junction is protruding outside the casing. So that is exposed type of thermocouple junction. Quickly we'll see. At the tip of the grounded junction probe, thermocouple wires are physically attached to the inside of the probe wall. This results in good heat transfer from the outside through the probe wall to the thermocouple junction. Okay, so it provides me better output voltage because it is giving me better temperature gradient. In an ungrounded probe, thermocouple junction is detached from the probe wall. See, thermocouple junction is detached from the probe wall. Response time is slower than the grounded style, but the ungrounded junction offers better electrical insulation. Response time is slow. Grounded junction thermocouple gives me quick response, whereas ungrounded thermocouple junction gives me slow response. The thermocouple in the exposed junction style protrudes out of the tip of the sheath and is exposed to the surrounding environment. This type offers the best response time, but is limited in use to dry, non-corrosive and non-pressurized application. जर काय exposed असेल तर काय होईल, जर humidity जास्त असेल तर it will have effect on the conductivity, right? If it is immersed in some corrosive chemical fluid whose temperature is to be measured, it will have effect. And if the pressure is higher pressure, then also its performance is affected. So use of exposed junction type thermocouple is limited to dry conditions, non-corrosive environment, and non-pressurized applications, right? Otherwise, for general cases, grounded is best. Next is ungrounded, and last choice is exposed. Okay, this is how is in broad categorization of thermocouples. Now let us see few of the characteristics of various types of thermocouples. In industry, these types are called as T-type thermocouple, J-type thermocouple, K-type thermocouple, E-type thermocouple, S-type thermocouple, R-type thermocouple, B-type thermocouple, and W5 type thermocouples. Okay, the first one, T-type, is called as copper constantan type thermocouple. Now, constantan is made up of copper and nickel, whereas chromel is nickel plus chromium, alumel is nickel plus aluminum. So copper constantan gives me sensitivity of 20 to 60 microvolt per degree Celsius. For 1 degree is Celsius input temperature difference, it will give me 20 to 60 microvolt, right? And the useful temperature range is minus 180 to plus 400 degrees Celsius. Compared to that, I have got J-type ion constantan type provides me sensitivity range of 45 to 55, temperature range of minus 180 degrees Celsius to plus 850 degrees Celsius. K-type is chromel alumel type. The sensitivity varies between 40 to 55, and the temperature range is minus 200 to plus 1300. So K-type provides me bit broader range, temperature range, isn't it? So depending on the temperature ranges I want in my industrial application, I should select appropriate thermocouple, either T-type, J-type, K-type, E-type, S-type, and so on and so forth. E-type thermocouple material is chromel constantan. Sensitivity is 55 to 80, and useful temperature range is minus 180 degrees Celsius to plus 850. Then I have got S-type, platinum plus 10% rhodium. Sensitivity is lesser, 5 to 12, but the useful temperature range is 0 to plus 1400. In R-type, platinum plus 13% rhodium. Sensitivity is same, but the temperature range is broader now, 0 to plus 1600 degrees Celsius. In B-type, platinum and 30% rhodium, platinum plus 6% rhodium. We got sensitivity of 5 to 12. The temperature range is plus 100 to plus 1800. Whereas W5 type, where I'm going to make use of tungsten and rhenium, tungsten and 5% rhenium, tungsten and 20% rhenium, sensitivity is 5 to 12, but the temperature range is 0 to plus 300. These we need to remember, friends, so that in my industrial mechatronic applications, I should be selecting appropriate type of thermocouple. Now, on what factors the selection of thermocouple is dependent? Quickly, we'll see criteria for selecting a thermocouple. What is the temperature range that I want? What is the chemical resistance of the thermocouple or the sheath material? What is the abrasion and vibration resistance? And what are the installation requirements? May need to be compatible with existing equipment. Existing holes may determine probe diameter. म्हणजे तिथं मला माउंटिंगची काय प्रोव्हिजन अवेलेबल आहे त्याच्यावर माझं सिलेक्शन डिपेंडंट राहील. व्हायब्रेशन्स अँड अब्रेजन झीज काय होणार आहे बाबा तिथं. केमिकल कुठलं वापरणार आहे ज्याचं टेम्परेचर मला मेजर करायचं आहे त्याचा माझ्या प्रोबवर काय परिणाम होणार आहे का किंवा माझ्या थर्मोकपल मटेरियलवर काय परिणाम होणार का आणि टेम्परेचर. सो दीज फॅक्टर्स आय शुड कन्सिडर while selecting appropriate thermocouple. Applications of thermocouples: to monitor temperatures and chemistry through various process industries. Testing temperatures associated with process plants, testing of heating appliances safety, temperature profiling in ovens, furnaces and kilns, temperature measurement of gas turbine and engine exhaust, monitoring of temperatures throughout the production and smelting process in steel, iron and aluminum industry. They make use of appropriate type of thermocouples for these various applications. We'll see the RTD in the next class. Thank you for watching. Thank you.